All right, well, good morning and welcome back. We've had a few days off here, and so hopefully you took some time here to kind of recharge your energy cells here. Hey, it would be great to put into the chat, kind of like your highlight for the weekend, or something that you might have tried maybe a little different, or something that was unique, whatever it might be. Just put into the chat a highlight. As you're thinking about that, I'll share a moment. My son, he's a junior at the University of Minnesota, and he lives with a group of guys off campus. And on Monday nights, he always has orchestra because he still wants to stay connected with that, even though he's an environmental science guy. Orchestra is very important to him, and he's having some difficulty getting the car started over the weekend. We know in Minnesota that if you have a car sitting outside and it's below zero for a number of days, you got to make an effort. That doesn't get into his frame of thinking sometimes. And so eventually he got the car started. And then after going to orchestra on Monday, he gives me a phone call. And I'm like, oh, what's this phone call going to be? So I guess this was probably more like a low light than a highlight for the weekend here. And he sends me a photo, and the back window of the Ford Escape, the hinges on the back window busted off, maybe because of cold and all that stuff. And so he doesn't quite know what to do. Here you got a window hanging by its wires on the back, and try to talk him through it. And ultimately, I had to drive out there and get the vehicle and get it fixed. But I guess, looking at that's kind of like my highlight, low light, got connect with my son. But perhaps maybe it would be different circumstances and such like that. So, hey, it'd be great if you could put into the chat, share some things that you might have done. That'd be great. So got through a book I've been reading. I'm slugging away at a book as well. Always great. Go out to the farmhouse. Fantastic. Hanging out with some buddies. That's always good. Third speech term in a row, winning it. Well done. Qualified for nationals. Huge. So well done there as well. So great. Today we kind of have a lot on the docket here, because we have been gone for a few days. We have a short week. And so I want to make sure that I go over a few things related to this case study on the Second World War, but also knowing that next week we're going to be shifting back to the hybrid model. And so I want to go over some of the new protocols related to that. And more specifically, how it's going to be for my class, and then jump into that Second World War. We have a fairly good understanding of it, but again, just like in the First World War, maybe something I bring in, or as you're studying it, you learn a few new elements of it. All right, so I'm going to go over some of the protocols here of the shift. So we'll take away from the curriculum here and focus on that piece. And you can anticipate in hours 2 and 3, if you have hours 2 and 3, that they will be talking about their protocols as well, and a little bit about kind of reacclimating to school, because we've been out for a little while of being in the building. And so it's just a matter of bringing you back into get ready and bring you back to that mode again here. All right, so I got a few slides that I want to share with you. And you can always put into the chat, raise your hand, and I'll try to address those questions to the best of my ability. All right. So when we look ahead here for the school day, we're basically looking at this hybrid model being initiated next week, and will take us to the end of this trimester. And That means we're going to the A, B day, and then Friday will be Flex Friday. And so this is kind of like an overview of the calendar is that you can see. We will not have school on Friday or a Friday of this week. That's going to be giving me some prep time here. And I'll take a look at the trimester 3.1 schedule and see if I can make some mods to that as well. I have been making some kind of tweaks to the last couple weeks, and you might have seen some of the dates change and stuff like that. Monday of next week, we won't have school because it's President's Day. And so we'll start with a B day. We'll start with a B day on Tuesday, and it's for 11th and 12th grade. And you can see that we'll go B, A, B, A, and then the following week, A, B, and then all online. And so you'll probably have some type of embedded health or advisory. And then Monday, March 1st, we'll have an A, and that's when 9th grade is going to be starting as well. And so then we'll have 9 through 12 in the building, then a B, A, and a B, and then the end of the trimester. So that's kind of like what our calendar looks like going forward. Now, school day overview. We'll be following the Bell schedule for all students, whether you are learning in person or from home. And in a 5-day week, you'll have 5 days of content loaded for each class that will take approximately 75 to 90 minutes per work day. All right, so that's what you can anticipate, and that's what I'm going to give you. And sometimes you'll have less than 75, sometimes you'll have more, sometimes it'll take you to that 90 minutes. Depends on how efficient you are at working. Okay, now in regards to, I think I took my camera off here. All right, in regards to, my class, this is how IB history is going to operate, and Miss Ida and I, we will do the same thing, for IB history, whether it's 11th or 12th grade. Classroom instructional guidelines, all right? And this is what you're going to really need to dial in for each of your teachers, all right? So whether you are A, B, or VLA, you're going to need to dial it in for what your teachers are going to focus on and how they're going to teach their class. So for my class, and I'm only going to speak for my class, IB history, starting on Tuesday, February 16th, we will continue with synchronous learning, and that will be the model for our class. All right, and class will be taught live Monday through Friday. That includes Flex Friday. So we will continue basically with what we are doing, whether you're here or at home. We're going to have live teaching. So that means in my classroom, I'll be setting up my camera and do the instructions. And so you at home will be able to see what we are doing here in class, or more importantly, what's going on the screen and what I am delivering to the classroom on that particular day. All right. All right, Colin, in a moment here, this next slide will take care of everything, I think. All right. And so here we go. All students, A, B, VLA, will need to attend class every day. All right. So if you're a VLA student, we're not going to go to this asynchronous model. We're going to be synchronous. All right. And again, this is why we have to pay attention to what individual teachers are doing. So for me, everyone is required. That is how attendance is going to be taken. And if you do not attend, it will be marked absent. Okay. So Flex Fridays are instructional days. They're not optional. So that also includes Friday as well. So instruction is 5 days a week. So Mr. Newcomb is going to be standing in front of the class and he's going to be instructing, or he's going to be standing in front of that camera and he's going to be instructing as well. So Flex Fridays, so recap here, Flex Fridays are instructional days, not optional. Instruction is 5 days a week. All students need to attend class every day. This is how attendance will be taken. You'll be marked absent if you do not attend the live Google Meet, just like during distant learning. All right, so if you're absent, please watch the recording of the class session, and I will put, every day I have been putting into the course resource folder where there is recordings of the class session. You'll be able to continue to go there and you'll find the class session for that particular day. Come to office hours if you have questions, utilize those times as well. All right. And the schedule. So I think a big thing here is shifting. Instead of having a 9 o'clock start, we're going to an 8:35 a.m. start. All right. So period 1 will be 8:35 to 9:50 a.m. 75-minute class and 10 minutes in between the classes. That's going to give me time to go around and clean the desks and wipe down the handles and all that stuff, try to basically sanitize the room. Second period is 10 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. Period 3, that's during lunchtime. And so you're going to want to find out with your hour 3, your period 3 instructor, which is their lunch. And then office hours is from 1:30 to 2:15 p.m. And again, everyone is welcome. If you have a question, please pop in at that moment. And then Flex Friday, it's a little bit shorter. The day for you will end at 11:45 a.m. If there's advisory or embedded health, it's going to be at 8:35. But then you can anticipate hour 1 at 9 o'clock, and hour 2 at 10, and hour 3 at 11. Okay, and so that is the protocols that we'll have for IB history. I guess the quick takeaway is we are going to continue with the flow that we're in. We're going to be synchronous. It's going to be live Google teaching, and everyone is going to be required to be here. All right, so that's the big takeaway. All right, is there any questions or concerns with that? All right, so if there aren't any, I will move forward, and you can always send me an email or a message or attend office hours, and we can talk about any concerns that you may have. Okay, so with that, your last week I had you look at the First World War as a total war, and then I also had you look at collective security. And so that was your task last week. And for those who had done the total war activity, and I looked at it, and I listened to all those podcasts and videos with my Diet Coke in hand and all that stuff. I listened to them, and I would say, well done. I think everyone is hitting the target here. So quickly, recap, when I look at the total war, the First World War, you were supposed to see to what extent was the First World War a total war. And I think you can make a really good claim that it was a total war. It hits the criteria. We can put a check mark by creating a large fighting force and conscription. All the major powers put massive armies on the field, and they relied on conscription or mandatory conscription, voluntary or mandatory conscription. So check that. Check use of civilians in the war effort, especially in the war industries, and then how they used women and minorities, and that varied from country to country. Check off the use of weapons, but did it really have an impact on the outcome of the war? We're going to get back to that one in a moment. Check off government control of the economy and morale. Government did greatly grow and got extremely involved in the everyday operation of war, as well as everyday operations of people. And then check off the list, targeting civilians. They were either caught in the war because the war was brought to them, or atrocities did occur. And so by that, looking at IB's definition of total war, the First World War meets it. Now, did the technology, and so this is a point, I think, as I listened to the podcasts and the videos, or I read the social media posts and cereal boxes and the slides, the question that I have is, did the technology have a greater impact on the outcome of the war, or was there other factors that determined the outcome of the war? What do we think? Did technology determine the outcome of the First World War?
I don't think it. I think nations were. They thought that the greater in technology meant winning the war, but I think it just prolonged it, or it increased the time, because, for instance, when the British made the dreadnought, it basically started the navy all the way down to zero, and you had to build back everyone's navy up. The tanks were another way to get past trench warfare, but then again, there was a lot of flaws to it. For instance, it was very slow. The use of poison gas and flamethrowers just only made the idea of trench warfare that much more horrifying. Air reconnaissance did help, but I don't think to it as much to an extent as it would have. So I think a lot of countries did believe that it would work, but I think it just it prolonged the war.
Okay, so if the technology is prolonging the war, creating what we might say the stalemate, one side comes up with the tank, the other side has the tank. One comes up with the gas, the other side has the gas. You got the big guns, all that stuff going on. You have the blockades, you have all that stuff. So if it prolonged the war, then what really is contributing to the conclusion of the war?
Fatigue.
Fatigue. Can you explain? Can you elaborate on that one?
Well, all nations were running out of men. They were throwing so many people into so many bloody battles and losses that there was not... War support was definitely fatiguing. And then in Germany, the lost battle, the book mentions it, whatever battle in 1516, where the British took over naval dominance, they just slowly starved out all German food exports. So the German populace was suffering, and the army suffered accordingly, because there was just not enough food. So it was a ticking time bomb for the armistice.
All right, so I see what you're saying with the fatigue piece, and so then you break up that fatigue into a number of categories, or branch it off, and you got the fatigue on the battlefield, but you got the fatigue at home. And I think that's a really good point about the fatigue at home. And really, when you look at zeroing in on you can zero in on Germany, but then you can also take a look at with Russia too, and how it knocked Russia out with the revolution at home and the mutinies at home and the rioting that's going on, and how that contributes to the Russian government getting out of the war. And we know the communists are going to take over, and peace treaty signed there. But Germany itself will also experience some unrest at home. And so some, make claims that, you have these large armies still in the field, but it's the domestic matters at home that is ultimately the catalyst that gets nations out of the conflict. So I think I like this idea of fatigue. So that's a good point. All right. So war gets done. You fight as long as they did. However, the new kids on the block, the United States shows up, and we provide a lot of resources, manpower, potential manpower, and all that stuff. But realistically, we like to say that Uncle Sam, was the big catalyst here for the end of the war, but we may not have. We may not have. There could have been some other factors out there and mentioned as well. So peace is at hand, and you've got the Treaty of Versailles, and very punitive, as we have come across and studied. And a new League of Nations is created. This was a brainchild of Woodrow Wilson, part of his 14 points. But hey, we didn't even join it, but it's his idea. And this League of Friends, or Society of Friends, was supposed to create this idea of collective security. All right. Can someone give me in the chat or unmute what they think collective security is? What could collective security be? Put it in the chat or unmute.
Wasn't it our first attempt at basically strong-arming everyone into not liking each other, but to prevent another war?
Strong arming. That's an interesting choice of words. But the idea of a group preventing conflict, is that what you're getting at, Drew?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you've got a body of nations who might not necessarily like each other on a daily basis, may not want to sit down and as I would like to say, sit down and crack a Diet Coke and have a conversation. But there's something that they're striving for, and it's peace. And try to avoid a big old conflict that was just fought. This idea that peace could be preserved by countries acting together collectively to prevent war. All right, this idea of preventing war. And that is really, if we look at Woodrow Wilson's, the first 14 points are looking at causes of war. And so collective security in some ways is addressing that. All right, that's the idea. All right, but in reality, how well did we do with collective security? All right, it's hard to see people's facial expressions when you throw how likely, how did we do with collective security, because we don't have too many people with their cameras on. But I would say how did we do? I kind of give it a thumbs down. We didn't do so well. In the 20s we might have, in the 30s not so well. And why did we not do so well with collective security? A problem is not all, if we want to use the word stakeholders, not all the stakeholders were at the table. There were some absence of some major powers like us, and the membership kept changing. And it shifted because of perhaps priorities in their countries had shifted as well. There were successful measures, but they were pretty minor. If there's a conflict that they solved, it might have been a minor conflict, but if it was a major crisis, like Italy taking on Abyssinia, or Japan invading China, the League of Nations, it fell flat on it, lacked the political will and to find resolution with it. Appeasement seems to be the mode of operation here. International global crisis like the Great Depression, all that stuff adds to why we failed to collectively work towards solutions here. And the idea of disarmament, did not succeed. Some of these measures would happen outside the League of Nations because the United States wasn't part of it. And so if we were going to take on these issues, we're going to kind of have to work on the periphery of the League of Nations. So collective security. So our first go at collective security is going to be a struggle, a work in progress. Our second go of collective security under the United Nations will work better, but that's for another day of discussion. All right, on the merits of it. Okay, so those were just a quick recap of. I think it was a quick recap, but you might not. But in my head, it was a quick recap of the First World War as a total war and collective security, what it all is. Okay, now what we do kind of know that the First World War, some of the lingering issues of the First World War will carry over into the next decades and perhaps bring on the Second World War. All right, I'm going to bust this up a little bit here. I got a video clip that looks at this. Did World War I lead to the Second World War? And then I have a few thoughts about the war in Europe that's going to happen, and I'll call it Hitler's War because I'm going to make a claim that it was Hitler's War. And then if we have some time, I've got the activity here. All right, so got a little video clip. See if we can come up with some takeaways.
World War I leads to World War II as day follows night. By the end of World War I, everybody is looking to get advantage.
World War I didn't really end in 1918. It brutalized an entire generation of Europeans. It brutalized an entire generation of people around the world. And it made them realize that war on this scale was not only possible, but actually thinkable.
There's a wonderful, wonderful political cartoon where the fat politicians and generals are walking out of Versailles, and there's a little tiny boy, and he's crying in the corner. And I'm not kidding, he says, "I'm cannon fodder for 1940. They knew, anyone with half a brain knew that the Treaty of Versailles was essentially the starting gun for the Second World War.
Essentially what happened is that you create such an unstable economy and so much animosity between nations that you're just seeding the field of war to rise and grow again.
A lot of the anger, animosity, resentment that fuels the rise of the National Socialists of Adolf Hitler in Germany can be directly tied to that. It would be difficult to argue that that's simply propaganda that's utilized by Adolf Hitler. These were very difficult terms for the German people to handle. And it creates this bunker mentality, this us against the world mentality that ultimately will play out in Hitler being able to create a program that appeals to that sentiment.
To the average German, they have been sold out by the politicians.
In particular, it made people like Adolf Hitler, who had fought, after all, in the German army in World War I, think that if only the Germans could do it again, but do it right this time, they could actually win.
We call it World War I, World War II, but it's really two different stages of one global conflict. Just happens that people put their arms down for a 20-year period, and then they went back to fighting again.
All right, so I always find it very interesting with that that last historian, how she describes that, you know, realistically, the two world wars are really the same type of war. It's just a continuation, and we have this time period of what we call the interregnum of peace, and we just pick up again here. So there is a lot of lingering issues after the First World War that will contribute to it, and so I do want to take a look at those. And so there we go. I do have a copy of these notes, and you can find them in the presentation note folder, and you can follow along with them, download them, write on them, follow along as we go through it. No, you do not necessarily need to take your own notes and stuff like that, but sometimes, you know, it just helps you to remember it as you go back and you reference it, and who knows, any of these things could find themselves on the IB exam. So I want to pick up on some of the points that were mentioned in that little video clip there, but as you know, we get ready to go here. Does anyone have any takeaways just from that little video clip? I want to give you a moment to share what you processed. Okay. Again, feel free to always put in the chat your thoughts, or just chime in. Just like if we're in the classroom, I'm okay with just blurting out what you think. Winston Churchill. All right, he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Not at the time of the outbreak of the war. That would be Neville Chamberlain. But Winston Churchill, you might know a few things about the conflict that will potentially happen, and does happen, because he will lead Great Britain through most of the Second World War. Well, Winston Churchill makes a claim here that Hitler had a master plan, and that's why I want to call it Hitler's War. So Hitler had a master plan for the domination of Europe, which Hitler had outlined in his book Mein Kampf. Churchill went on to suggest that the granite pillars of his plan had to reunite Germans in a greater German empire and to conquer Eastern Europe by force. War was inevitable to attaining these goals, and Hitler pursued these ambitions by creating a militarized nation. In Churchill's analysis, the turning point was 1935, when Germany rearmed. From that point on, war was the only way to stop Hitler. So the takeaway that I have from that particular quote is Hitler had a master plan. And this master plan actually had been working on prior to him becoming chancellor. So he had a master plan in 1935. Now that he has been in the chancellorship for a couple of years, he'll begin to act on his master plan. And the Western democracies, well, they kind of failed. They failed in this idea of collective security. The prevailing policy of the day was appeasement. You know, let's just give in. You know, so Winston Churchill therefore would say, and others in the similar frame of thinking would say, hey, the only way to stop the guy is through war. So let's take a look at, I want to, the next couple slides, take a look at how does Hitler go about creating his foreign policy, and then the assignment is actually looking at the steps Hitler is going to take to lead Germany to the conflict. All right. So Hitler's foreign policy aims, there are a number of ideas adding to it, or oh, I got a little happy there. Okay, so we have to look at what are the components of his foreign policy aims and what is contributing to it. Now, Adolf Hitler, he's going to rise to power in 1933. He's going to get the chancellorship, but he is on the scene realistically from in 1919. And so from 1919, 1933, he's going to work on his foreign policy aims. So where can we find it? Well, we look at the Treaty of Versailles in Hitler's perspective, but then also in German's perspective, they just simply look at it as a dictated treaty that Germany did not have a say. Germany had to accept it. It was dictated to them. And so that builds resentment. Also, Germany, though, at the end of the war, is still left in a rather dominant position. Yes, it lost about 10% of its territory and some of its citizens, some of its population, but realistically, the industrial and infrastructure still remained intact because the war really did not come into what we'll call the heart of Germany. So Germany is left in a pretty dominant position. Now, there is going to be the formation of the German Workers' Party. It's going to be renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party. It's formed in 1919, and it was to be an alternative to the communists. Hitler early on joins the party because he does tend to identify with some of the ideas, and he becomes the leader in 1921. The main leader. He wrestles it away from Anton Drexler. But we can get a sense of where he's going to go if he becomes leader of Germany by looking at something that's known as the 25-point program. Now, we don't need to know each of the 25 points, but they are a collection of very nationalistic and socialist items. And it's Hitler's intentions if the Nazis secure power in Germany. There are a couple in there that speak to foreign policy, such as we demand the unification of all Germans in a greater Germany on the basis of right of self-determination of the peoples. And then also we demand land and territory, the colonies, for the subsistence of our people. But he doesn't necessarily tell us how is he going to go about doing it. So that's a big thing about his foreign policy is he's got ideas, but how to implement them. He does, though, make an attempt. The Nazis want to try to seize power in 1923. They do it from a beer hall in Munich. It fails. He's sent to prison in 9 months, but there he writes Mein Kampf. And realistically, in a foreign policy lens, we look at Mein Kampf as what we call as a Stufenplan, right? Which is master plan. And in there, he does lay out steps, okay? 3-part steps. Part 1, massive military buildup. Throw off the Treaty of Versailles and create an alliance with Italy and then also with the British Empire. He does admire the British Empire. In the second phase of his foreign policy that's mentioned in Mein Kampf is what we call a quick war or blitzkrieg, lightning war against France and their Eastern allies. And then the third phase of his foreign policy is war. But who do you think the war is going to be with?
Russia?
Yes, absolutely, Russia. Ideologically, Germany is polar opposite of the communists, and so they do look at the communists as a threat. And this is an ideological threat. But then also what Russia stands for and who might be behind Russia's communism and stuff like that. All plays in there. Of course, in the 25-point program, there's race ideology in there too. And he also brings that up in Mein Kampf too. So failed beer hall putsch does cause the Nazis to rethink, all right, if they can't do it violently, they're going to do it through the ballot. In 1928, they have their big breakout moment, but it fails to really have success in the election. There were some external factors that contribute to it. It looks at this point that the Nazi Party is close to being knocked out, but you can't discount Hitler here. He writes another book. It's called A Secret Book or Zweites Buch. And in this one, it talks about more long-term ambitions, Lebensraum. And that means expanding, creating this living space for Germans, and spells out a little bit how that's going to work. And some military ambitions are in there as well, but it also brings on a fourth phase. So if the third phase was against the Soviet Union, the fourth phase is probably going to be against who? This is where I always get historical goosebumps. What do we think?
Well, after Russia would probably come France, right?
Oh, he took out France in phase 2.
You'll go after Russia.
Oh no, that was phase 3, man.
Did he want to go after America?
Yeah, holy cow, way to go. You want to pick on us.
Well, what a man.
All right, so the fourth phase really is this idea of world domination. It's like, wow, that's aggressive. That's aggressive. Now, the thing is, though, not too many people know about this Zweites Buch because he doesn't make that intention known to Greater Germany, to really the Nazi Party. Only those are in his inner circle. And Zweites Buch, once the manuscript is found, will be published after the war. So realistically, we in the United States didn't know that. So this is one of these things when archives open up, manuscripts are found, we find out, and we're like, wow, this guy really did have this idea of world domination on his mind. Now, his rise to power, I did say 1928, so I'm going to take it home here. In 1928, looks like he was going to get knocked out, but reorganized and made a bigger national push here, but then also factors between 1928 and 1932. There's going to be a lot of things going on that's going to work for this guy. And probably the biggest thing that works for him is the global economic crisis impacts the stability of the Weimar Republic. Unemployment, despair paved the way for a person like Adolf Hitler. So in 1932, German people really had two viable options here: the Nazi Party or the Communist Party. So they had two big choices. And in 1932, the Nazis, huge win. 37% of the vote, 230 seats in the Reichstag. Doesn't give them an outright majority, but there are some other nationalist groups that will be willing to work with the Nazis here. So they came to power legally here. Hindenburg and conservatives, though, are a little skeptical of Hitler, but they still think they can control him. And so in January of 1933, Hindenburg offers Hitler the chancellorship. And so now he works on consolidating his power. And that becomes important because that helps bring his foreign policy aims to reality once he can consolidate his power. He gains the cooperation of the military and the industrialists by simply eliminating any opposition within the Nazi Party that could be viewed as socialist. So this is where you might have remembered the Night of the Long Knives in June and July of 1934, Operation Hummingbird, as it would call. He gets rid of the socialists in the Nazi Party. That sends a message to the conservatives and the business leaders that there's not going to be a second revolution that's going to happen here. He restricts the rights of the opposition and the citizenry. There'll be a fire in the Reichstag, and so he's going to use that to his advantage, and an enabling act is going to pass, and the guy's going to have pretty much legislative power there. Restructures the government, put Nazis in key positions, and then you get the death of Hindenburg. And Paul von Hindenburg is a hero of World War I. He's a rock star and a big opponent of Hitler. He dies, and Hitler just simply assumes the title of president of Germany, because that's what Paul von Hindenburg was. And so he's the president, he's the chancellor, he's the head of the Nazi Party. He is it. He is it. So now it's just a matter of going to war. And so these events represent him acting on his foreign policy aims. Now, again, like I said, there are a lot of places you can find his foreign policy aims, but it's not just one collective policy here. And how to implement it still is a little gray. All right, so revising the Treaty of Versailles may begin in 1933, and the invasion of Poland in 1939 really represent the beginnings of the Second World War in Europe. The Second World War, you could say, really is already going on in Asia Pacific with the Sino-Japanese War. So all these events we're going to need to take a look at. All right, and so that's where your homework is going to come into play here. Does anyone have any questions about what I just said? All right. Trying to be conscious of time here. So in Schoology, you will see the assignment. I had opened it up prior to today. And so thought maybe, you might take a look at it, but if you didn't, that's all right. And it's called Road to the Second World War. And it's going to actually take a look at Germany, but also Japan here. And some might be a little upset that Italy is not getting fair shot here, and we're just going to focus a lot on Germany and Japan and bring in Italy when possible. But when you look at this assignment, and you're going to use chapter 6 and 7 in our textbook for this, it's going to look something like this when you open it up. And again, I have a graphic organizer, and in some cases it presents itself the best way of dealing with this. So there's two parts. Part A is looking at Hitler's war, and part B is going to be looking at Japan. All right, your emphasis really is focusing on the first part. So these short-term causes here, Hitler and the short-term causes, the events, these are what I had on the screen on my lecture notes. And so what you're going to do is you're going to look at, what was Hitler's justification for the act or action? You want to find out, what is he thinking, if possible? What is he thinking here? And then how did people react to it? How did the Europeans or individual nations react to it? Sometimes you might have to give a little historical speculation. All right. And then you got to look at it just kind of like what we did with the Spanish Civil War. Is this a major or a minor event? For Hitler and for Germans in general, revising the Treaty of Versailles was huge. This was part of his foreign policy aim. He announced that Germany would not resume reparation payments. He announced the rearmament of Germany. He withdrew Germany from the League of Nations. He announced Germany would introduce compulsory military service. All these acts violated the Treaty of Versailles. So these are things that Hitler, as well as many Germans, didn't like about the Treaty of Versailles. So this is what they were doing, and Hitler knew that he's got the German people on his side. European powers had hoped that the revisions would satisfy people in Germany, but they really failed collectively to stop the guy. And this is only going to feed his aggressive behavior. This is a major event. Here was the moment that Germany is perhaps at its weakest point, and the knockout could have happened. Didn't. So then you look at all these other events. There's that Spanish Civil War. And approach it with the same lens. All right, in answering these questions. And that's really what your homework is for today. Just deal with part A. Part B, we'll address it tomorrow. Okay, and then of course, like anything, part C, hopefully we've been trained by now. You know that there's always going to be some type of big historical question at the end, some type of summary question. There we go. To what extent was World War II Hitler's war? And to what extent was Japan responsible for the outbreak of the war in the Pacific? There are some people that will throw out there that the United States is responsible for the outbreak of the Second World War. That will make too many veteran groups in the United States happy. All right, that was a lot. Epic lesson here. Do we have any questions about anything related to this? Ultimately, I believe this is due Friday, February 2nd. Excuse me, February 12th. All right. Anything in general? I threw a lot out there right now. Okay, tomorrow I'll review again the protocols of what teaching will, or what the classroom will look like next week. So just in case if you forget, or if you have some thoughts about it, you can share it at that time, or you can send me an email, or again, attend office hours and we can chit chat about it. If you don't have any questions, you can stay on the Google Meet, work on the assignment, ask questions when they come up, or simply exit and have a fantastic day.